The whisper of the moon, in a remote mountain village nestled high in the Himalayas, where prayer flags danced in the icy wind and the ancient monastery echoed with the chants of long ago. There was a legend whispered from generation to generation. They said that on the brightest nights, when the moon hung like a silver sickle in the inky sky, its light painting the snow-capped peaks with ethereal beauty, the moon spoke. Its voice was soft, carried on the wings of the night wind, filled with an otherworldly sorrow that stirred something deep within the listener's soul. One fateful night, drawn by an insatiable curiosity, or perhaps a touch of madness, a young man named Tenzin decided to venture out and try to hear the moon's whisper for himself. He left the safety of his village, the familiar sounds of human voices and laughter, and climbed up the mountainside. As he ascended higher, the air grew colder, the wind more biting, but his resolve only strengthened. Upon reaching a rocky outcrop, Tenzin settled down. He looked up at the moon and waited. The night wore on, the hours melting away like ice cubes in a cup of hot tea. Just when his hope began to dwindle, he heard it, a faint sound like the rustling of silk, like a sigh carried on the wind. The young man held his breath, listening intently. The sound grew, taking shape, forming words. "Why do you mortals mock me? Why do you build your lives around my absence? Do you not feel my pain? Do you not hear my cry?" The voice echoed around him, resonating in the vast emptiness of the mountains. It seemed to come from everywhere, and nowhere at once, weaving through the rocks and trees, wrapping itself around Tenzin's heart. Startled, Tenzin tried to run, but his legs felt heavy as lead. Fear tightened its icy grip around his heart, squeezing the breath from his lungs. Then the voice boomed, shaking the very foundations of the mountain. "Who dares defy me? Who dares ignore my call?" It seemed to be right behind him, close enough to brush the hairs on the back of his neck. Tenzin whirled around, but he saw nothing in the pale moonlight except the desolate landscape. Was he losing his mind? Or was the moon truly speaking to him? Before he could ponder further, the voice began again, softer now, insidious, weaving its way into his consciousness like a spider spinning its web. It spoke of an ancient time when the moon was more than just a celestial body, when it was a powerful deity, revered and worshipped by all living things. It told of how the moon was betrayed by those it had loved, cast out of the heavens by jealous gods, and cursed to roam the skies for eternity, forever alone, forever mournful. The longer Tenzin listened, the deeper the sorrow of the moon wormed its way into his soul. It was a sorrow so profound, so heart-wrenching that it threatened to consume him, to drown him in its depths. And then the moon whispered something that turned Tenzin's blood to ice. "I am the moon," it said, "and I have waited for someone like you, someone who can hear my lament, someone who can help me break my curse." Relief flooded Tenzin, followed by a surge of determination. Finally, an answer, a reason for his village's ancient tales. He spent the rest of the night talking to the moon, pouring out his heart and asking questions. With the first rays of dawn, the whispering ceased. The moon, as if bashful after its midnight confessions, retreated behind a veil of clouds, leaving Tenzin alone on the mountaintop, his mind reeling with what he had heard. From that day forward, Tenzin's life changed. He could still hear the moon's whisper whenever he climbed the mountain, and he did so every night, hoping to find a way to help the celestial deity. But the more he listened, the more he learned, the more he realized the terrible price he might have to pay. For the moon's sorrow was not just ancient history, it was alive, pulsing in the celestial expanse like a festering wound. And as Tenzin delved deeper into its tale, he sensed a darkness stirring within its depths, a darkness that threatened to spill out and engulf the world. In his desperation, Tenzin sought help from the aged monks of his village, pouring out the moon's tale and asking for guidance. But their wrinkled faces creased with worry, their eyes clouded with ancient knowledge. They told him of a time when men had listened to the moon's whispers too closely, when they had tried to harness its power, and of the terrible consequences that had followed. They spoke of a creeping madness that had overtaken entire villages, turning neighbors against each other, families against their own kin. They told of a despair so profound it had withered crops, choked rivers, and darkened hearts. And finally, they warned of a darkness that had seeped into the minds of men, twisting their souls and turning them into vessels of chaos and destruction. But Tenzin couldn't bear to turn away. The moon's sorrow had burrowed too deeply into his soul. He was determined to help it, even if it meant facing the darkness within. So armed with the ancient texts and armed with the hope that knowledge would be his shield, Tenzin began his ascent. Every night he climbed the mountain, seeking to understand the moon's laments, to unravel the mysteries of its sorrow. Each night the whispers grew louder, the darkness more palpable, and Tenzin's resolve was tested. There were times when the whispers taunted him, tempting him with visions of power, promising to share its ancient strength if he would but listen more closely. But Tenzin resisted, clinging to his humanity, refusing to let the moon's sorrow consume him. One night, as Tenzin sat on his rocky perch, the moon poured out its anguish, telling of a love so deep it had defied the laws of heaven, a love that had been scorned and shattered, leaving the moon in eternal torment. And then it whispered of a ritual, a way to end its sorrow, to lift the curse that bound it to the sky. It was a terrible price. The moon offered Tenzin to become one with it, to lose his humanity and become an immortal being of pure energy, forever bound to the skies, forever whispering its sorrows to an uncaring universe. But Tenzin felt a strange pull, an echo of the moon's longing in his own heart. Could he bring peace to the moon, even if it meant sacrificing his own soul? Just when the moon's whispers threatened to overwhelm him, Tenzin remembered the faces of the villagers, their laughter, their hopes, their dreams. He thought of the warmth of the hearth, the taste of sweet butter tea, the comforting drone of prayers from the monastery. The moon's sorrow had touched him deeply, but his humanity was his anchor, his connection to the world, to the people he loved. With newfound strength, Tenzin pushed back against the moon's whispers, refusing its offer, choosing his humanity over immortality. The moon's voice cracked, surprise and betrayal echoing in its tone. You would deny me release? You would condemn me to an eternity of sorrow? But Tenzin held firm, his voice echoing in the vast emptiness of the mountains. Your sorrow is not mine to bear, your burden is your own. But know this, moon, even in my small life, I will always hear you, always remember you. As dawn approached, the moon retreated, defeated, leaving Tenzin alone with his thoughts. From that day on, Tenzin continued to climb the mountain, but the moon's whispers were different. There was a hint of sadness, yes, but also a new note, one of understanding. The moon acknowledged his choice, respected his decision, and in its nightly whispers, it shared stories of its sorrow, not to consume Tenzin, but to connect with him, to forge a bond between a mortal man and an immortal moon. Tenzin became known throughout the land as the Whisperer, the man who spoke with the moon, and people came from far and wide to hear his tales of the celestial deity and its unending sorrow. Yet Tenzin remained humble, knowing that he had faced the darkness, and chosen the light, chosen his humanity, and the bonds that made him one with the world. And as he sat on his mountaintop, listening to the moon's whispers, he found solace in the knowledge that even in the darkest nights, the faintest glimmer of hope can guide the way. And so the whisper of the moon continued to echo through the ages, a tale of sorrow and sacrifice, of darkness and hope. A reminder that even in the face of eternal darkness, the human spirit can prevail.